For 25 years, horse racing believed greatness had vanished. Experts called the Triple Crown unwinnable, and legends like Man o' War dominated weaker eras by margins, not times. But in 1973, one colt shattered every clock and redefined what good truly means. Subscribe and join our newsletter down below for more fascinating stories. Because what makes Secretariat's dominance impossible to ignore is not just victory. It is the evidence still fueling a debate 50 years later. But does raw speed mean more than history's myths? The answer changes everything. For a quarter of a century, the Triple Crown stood as a monument to lost possibility. Since Citation swept the series in 1948, no horse had managed to conquer all three races. Each spring, fresh contenders arrived only to be broken by the grind of the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont Stakes. The racing world grew restless. Headlines started to sound like obituaries for the sport's greatest challenge. Reporters called it the curse of the Triple Crown. Trainers whispered that the breed had changed. Modern horses, they said, simply weren't built to handle 3 races in 5 weeks at 3 different tracks, against the best of their generation. By 1973, skepticism had hardened into certainty. The New York Times ran stories questioning whether the feat was even physically possible anymore. One columnist wrote, "Perhaps the era of the superhorse has passed us by." Racing forums and backstretch conversations echoed the same doubts. The pressure on every new champion grew heavier with each failed attempt. In the years after Citation, horses like Tim Tam, Carry Back, Northern Dancer, and Forward Pass captured 2 legs, only to fall short at the final hurdle. The drought became a running joke, a wound that never quite healed. Even the most respected voices in the sport began to doubt. Bill Nack, who would later write the definitive biography of Secretariat, described the mood as resigned. In an archival interview, he recalled, "There was a feeling that the Triple Crown was just too much to ask of a modern racehorse. We'd seen too many bright hopes burn out." The weight of history pressed down on every owner, trainer, and jockey who dared to dream of sweeping the series. Crowds still packed Churchill Downs and Pimlico, but the sense of anticipation was tinged with cynicism. In 1973, more than 134,000 people filled the stands at the Kentucky Derby, the largest crowd in North American racing history to that point. They came searching for a miracle, but most expected another near miss. The curse had become part of the sport's identity, a symbol of how far the world had moved from the days of Man o' War and Citation. Yet beneath the skepticism, the hunger for greatness remained. Every year, the question returned: could any horse ever be good enough to break the spell? The answer, most believed, was no. And as the field lined up for the Derby that May, the shadow of 25 years without a Triple Crown winner loomed over every hopeful face. In the pantheon of American racehorses, one name always stands as the measuring stick: Man o' War. In 1920, he thundered through his 3-year-old season, winning 11 of 11 races by margins that bordered on the absurd. He once crossed the finish line 100 lengths ahead of his nearest rival, a number that has echoed through racing lore for a century. To many, those runaway victories became the gold standard for greatness. A horse so dominant his rivals seemed to vanish behind him. But the world Man o' War raced in was a different universe from the one Secretariat would inherit 5 decades later. After World War I, American racing was still rebuilding. Fields were often small, and the level of competition was uneven. Man o' War faced only one true rival of note: Upset, who handed him his sole defeat as a 2-year-old. The rest of his career, he was matched against horses who rarely threatened, and timekeeping was a far less precise science. Most of Man o' War's races were run against the clock only in the most general sense, stopwatches in hand, times scribbled in ledgers with no electronic timers or standardized track conditions. The focus was on how far he won, not how fast. This difference matters. In racing, margin tells a story, but time tells the truth. Margins can swell when the field is weak, or when a jockey eases up in the stretch. But the stopwatch has no such mercy. A horse's time is measured against history, against every champion who ever thundered down that same strip of dirt. By the 1970s, the sport had changed. The fields were deeper, the purses larger, and the scrutiny relentless. Every fraction of a second was recorded, analyzed, and debated. Secretariat entered this world, not as a myth, but as a cult with something to prove against the ghosts of the past. His challenge was not simply to win, but to run faster than any horse before him, under the cold eye of the clock. The debate between margin and time is not just academic. It is the difference between legend and measurement. Man o' War's 20 wins in 21 starts, his towering margins, and his aura of invincibility remain iconic. Yet, when historians try to compare him to Secretariat, the conversation always returns to the question, how fast, really, was the greatest horse of the 1920s? And how does that stack up to the records Secretariat would set on tracks that demanded the best from every contender? To answer that, the lens must shift from the romance of distance to the reality of time. In the next act of this story, the stopwatch takes center stage, and it is there, in the unforgiving numbers, that the case for Secretariat's greatness truly begins. The stopwatch never blinked on May 5th, 1973. Secretariat downs. The opening quarter flashed up, 25 1/5 seconds. For a Kentucky Derby, that is almost conservative. But what happened next defied every expectation and every pattern in the 99-year history of the race. Secretariat did not just maintain his pace, he accelerated, quarter after quarter, building momentum like a living engine. The second split came in at 24 seconds flat. The third was 23 4/5 seconds. Then, with the crowd's roar rising, Secretariat found yet another gear, 23 2/5 seconds for the fourth quarter. He was still in full flight, passing horses one by one, his stride lengthening with every bound. No horse had ever run the Derby this way. In every previous running, even the greatest champions slowed down late, their fastest fractions coming early before fatigue set in. It is unprecedented. The official chart, preserved by Equibase and the Jockey Club, reads like a mathematical anomaly. Each segment of the race was faster than the last, culminating in a final time of 1 minute, 59 2/5 seconds. That number remains untouched more than 50 years later. No horse has ever run the Kentucky Derby faster, not American Pharoah, not Justify, not Monarchos. The record stands, a monument to a performance that seems to break the rules of equine biology. Ron Turcotte, Secretariat's jockey, later explained, "This horse really paced himself. He is smart. I think he knew he was going 1.25 miles. I never pushed him." The splits back him up. Secretariat was not burning out early. He was building, coiling, and then unleashing his full power only when it mattered most. Racing analysts still struggle to explain it. Horses are not supposed to accelerate uphill through traffic at the end of the longest race of their young lives. An Equibase analyst, reviewing the official times decades later, called it the purest negative split ever recorded in a major stakes race. In distance running, negative splits, where the second half of a race is run faster than the first, are a mark of tactical brilliance and supreme conditioning. In horse racing, they are almost mythical. Secretariat's Derby did not just feature a negative split, it featured 4 consecutive negative quarters, each one faster than the last. The data, laid out quarter by quarter, forces even the most skeptical observer to pause. There is no trick of the camera, no margin of error, just the cold, hard numbers of the clock. For statisticians and racing historians, those splits form the backbone of Secretariat's legend. They are the reason his Derby is studied, debated, and marveled at half a century later. As one analyst put it, You can argue about field strength, but you cannot argue with the clock. The negative split. Miracle is not just a footnote. It is the forensic evidence that Secretariat was operating on a different plane from any horse before or since. Secretariat's final time in the 1973 Kentucky Derby, 1 minute, 59 2/5 seconds, stands as a boundary line in racing history. Not a single horse has crossed it in more than half a century. That time, 1 minute, 59 2/5 seconds, is burned into the record books, untouched by every champion who has thundered down the stretch at Churchill Downs since. Even the most celebrated modern stars have come up short. In 2015, American Pharaoh, who ended his own Triple Crown drought, finished the Derby in 2 minutes, 3.02 seconds. That is more than 3 seconds slower, roughly 18 lengths behind Secretariat's pace if the two had run side by side. Monaco's in 2001 came the closest, clocking 1 minute, 59.97 seconds, but still a tick away from matching the standard set in 1973. The durability of Secretariat's record is not just a quirk of timing. Every spring, the Derby draws the fastest 3-year-olds in North America, each one trained and conditioned with the latest science. The track itself has been resurfaced, maintained, and in some ways made faster over the decades. Yet the stopwatch remains stubborn. No matter how deep the field or how ideal the conditions, no one has managed to break 2 minutes except Secretariat and Monacos, and only Secretariat did it with negative splits, accelerating as the finish line approached. Steve Haskin, one of the foremost chroniclers of Derby history, has called Secretariat's 1 minute, 59 2/5 seconds the most unassailable record in American sports. He points out that the Derby is run under the brightest lights, with more scrutiny and more pressure than any other race. Every contender is at the peak of fitness, every trainer desperate for an edge. The fact that Secretariat's time has survived synthetic track revolutions, nutritional advances, and decades of genetic selection speaks to something beyond mere chance. Haskin notes, "You can have a fluke fast time in a minor stakes race. You do not get fluke times in the Kentucky Derby, not when every horse is running for immortality." The numbers tell a clear story. Since 1973, the average winning Derby time has hovered around 2 minutes and 2 seconds. Horses like Affirmed, Seattle Slew, and Spectacular Bid, all legends in their own right, never broke 2 minutes in the Derby. Even Justify, who swept the Triple Crown in 2018, finished in 2 minutes, 4.2 seconds. The gap is not closing. If anything, it is growing wider as training philosophies evolve to favor tactical speed and careful management over all-out stamina. American Pharaoh's 2015 campaign reignited old debates. He was hailed as a once-in-a-generation talent, and his Triple Crown run brought a flood of comparisons to Secretariat. But the clock offered a cold verdict. Pharaoh's Derby time, while impressive by modern standards, would not have put him within striking distance of Secretariat at any point in the race. Analysts broke down the splits, showing that Secretariat's sustained acceleration, his ability to run each quarter faster than the last, has never been duplicated, not even by the most recent champions. The contrast is stark. Secretariat's performance remains not just unbeaten, but largely unchallenged. The question of field strength often comes up in these discussions. Some argue that Secretariat faced weaker competition, but the numbers cut through the noise. Sham, who chased him home in the Derby, posted the second fastest time ever recorded in the race. No modern runner has managed to surpass even Sham's clocking, let alone Secretariat's. The 1973 Derby was not a slow race lifted by one outlier. It was a fast race elevated by a horse who seemed to break the rules of physiology. Year after year, as the Derby approaches, writers and handicappers revisit 1 minute, 59 2/5 seconds. It is not just a statistic. It is a challenge. Every new champion is measured against it, and every spring, the record survives. Secretariat's derby is more than a memory. It is a living benchmark, a line in the sand that defines greatness in the sport. The stopwatch, impartial and unrelenting, continues to honor what happened on that first Saturday in May 1973. The Preakness Stakes in 1973 produced one of the sport's most persistent controversies. As Secretariat thundered past the wire, the infield teletimer at Pimlico flashed 1 minute 55 seconds flat. But almost immediately, questions surfaced. Veteran clockers from the daily racing form, using their own handheld stopwatches, reported a much faster time, 1 minute 53 2/5 seconds. The official timer, damaged earlier in the day, had already drawn suspicion. Pimlico's own track timer recorded 1 minute 54 2/5 seconds. For decades, the record books listed Secretariat's Preakness at 1 minute 54 2/5 seconds, a record, but not the fastest ever. The dispute simmered for nearly 40 years. Racing fans and historians pored over grainy race footage, trying to reconcile the conflicting numbers. The heart of the matter was more than just pride. It was about data integrity. Secretariat's claim to the fastest Preakness ever run hung in the balance. Bill Knack, who chronicled the horse's life, described the controversy as a riddle that gnawed at the sport's soul. In his words, "The clock is the final judge. When the clock is wrong, the story is unfinished." In 2012, the Maryland Racing Commission took the unprecedented step of reopening the case. Using modern forensic technology, they analyzed the original broadcast footage frame by frame. Digital experts synchronized the film with the starting gate and finish line, measuring the precise interval. Secretariat covered the mile and 3/16. The result was unmistakable. Secretariat had run the Preakness in exactly 1 minute 53 seconds flat, faster than any horse in the history of the race. The Commission's unanimous decision erased decades of doubt and set the record straight. With that ruling, Secretariat's sweep of the Triple Crown became even more extraordinary. He now held the fastest official times in all 3 races: the Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. Each record was not just a number, but a forensic fact, verified by technology and careful review. The stopwatch, once questioned, now confirmed what so many had witnessed in awe. As the ink dried on the Commission's report, the legend of Secretariat grew even sharper, his speed now beyond dispute. The timing controversy at Pimlico closed one chapter and opened another. The data was secure, the record books updated, but the story of 1973 was never just about numbers. It was about the horses who chased Secretariat, the rivals who ran the races of their lives only to finish in his shadow. One name, in particular, stood out: Sham, the colt who would have been a legend in any other year, but found himself racing against a phenomenon. Join our newsletter down below for more fascinating stories and check out our other videos on the screen. Sham arrived at Churchill Downs in the spring of 1973 with the kind of resume that would make any trainer dream. He had stormed through the Santa Anita Derby, matching the stakes record, a mark that still stands decades later. His trainer was Frank Pancho Martin, and his jockey was Lafitte Pincay Jr. They believed they finally had a colt who could conquer the classics. In the Wood Memorial, Sham finished a hard-fought second, beating Secretariat to the wire and stamping himself as the West Coast's best hope. The Derby would be his proving ground. In the Kentucky Derby, Sham did everything right, and still it was not enough. He finished just 2.5 lengths behind Secretariat, and his own time, 1 minute 59 4/5 seconds, remains the second fastest Derby ever run. That day, Sham suffered a brutal blow at the starting gate, ripping out 2 teeth and bleeding through the race, yet he never gave in. He closed the final quarter in a blazing 23 2/5 seconds, a split matched only by legends like Whirlaway and Secretariat himself. Any other year, Sham's performance would have been enough to wear the roses. The Preakness offered no relief. Once again, Sham finished second to Secretariat, this time by the same margin. He pressed the pace, fought for every inch, but the finish line always seemed just out of reach. For 2 races, Sham had run at a level that would have made him a champion in almost any era. Instead, he was locked in a rivalry against a force of nature. Pinkay later said that any other year he would have had the Triple Crown winner, and that trying to beat Secretariat affected Sham. By the time the Belmont Stakes arrived, Sham had shouldered the full weight of the chase. He broke fast, matching Secretariat stride for stride through the opening mile, pushing the pace to a level few horses could survive. But as the field rounded the far turn, Sham began to falter. Pinkay sensed something was wrong. Sham faded badly, finishing last of 5, while Secretariat soared into the history books. Weeks later, trainers discovered Sham had fractured his cannon bone, likely during the Belmont itself or soon after. The injury ended his career and cast a somber light on his rivalry with Secretariat. Penny Chenery, Secretariat's owner, often spoke of Sham with respect. She knew that without a horse of his caliber, Secretariat's feats might not have shined as brightly. Sham was the rival who kept pushing, the one who refused to let Secretariat coast. Their duels gave the 1973 Triple Crown its edge, its drama, and its heartbreak. In another year, Sham would have been the story. In 1973, he became the measure of Secretariat's greatness, and a reminder that even legends need someone to chase them to the finish. June 9th, 1973. The Belmont Stakes, 1.5 miles, longer than any other Triple Crown race, drew over 67,000 to the grandstand. Secretariat broke clean, his chestnut coat gleaming, and Sham, his familiar rival, pressed him hard through the first half-mile. The two set a punishing pace, faster than most dared believe possible. But as they swept past the mile-pole, Sham's challenge faded. Secretariat, instead of tiring, found another gear. His stride lengthened, his movement seemed to defy fatigue. The gap behind him grew, 5 lengths, then 10, then 20. By the far turn, Secretariat was running alone, the rest of the field vanishing behind him. The official margin would be 31 lengths, over 250 feet. The camera crew scrambled, unable to keep both Secretariat and the trailing horses in the same shot. Secretariat simply kept pulling away, stretching the limits of what the lens could capture. In the stands, awe gave way to disbelief, then to wild celebration as he thundered down the stretch, blue and white silks flashing in the sun. Track announcer Sheik Anderson called, "He is moving like a tremendous machine." In that instant, Anderson's words did more than describe. They defined the moment, capturing the sense that Secretariat was not just fast, but something beyond ordinary measure. The phrase would echo for decades, replayed in every highlight reel, invoked in every conversation about greatness. The clock stopped at 2:24 flat. No horse had ever run 1.5 miles on dirt that fast, anywhere in the world. Secretariat shattered the world record by 2 3/5 seconds, a margin that in racing is almost unthinkable. The official chart caller, stunned by the visual, initially guessed 25 lengths, only to revise it to 31 after reviewing the finish. The numbers felt surreal, almost mythic. As Secretariat galloped out past the finish, the grandstand erupted. Owners, trainers, and lifelong fans stood in shock, some openly weeping. The Belmont had always been the ultimate test, the race that revealed every weakness. Instead, Secretariat turned it into a coronation, a display of supremacy that has never been matched. No horse has touched that 2:24 since. The 31-length margin stands as the largest in Belmont history, a number that still strains belief. In that moment, Secretariat did not just win the Triple Crown, he set the standard for greatness, a benchmark that endures half a century later. Join our newsletter down below for more fascinating stories and check out our other videos on the screen. When Secretariat died in 1989, his body was sent to the University of Kentucky for a full necropsy, a rare honor in the world of horse racing. Dr. Thomas Swerchek, the veterinary pathologist on duty at New Bolton Centre, expected to find a typical thoroughbred heart weighing between 8 and 10 pounds. What he discovered instead was a heart that tipped the scales at 22 pounds, nearly 3 times the average. Swerchek later described it as perfectly healthy, free of disease or deformity, just astonishingly large. The heart's size was not a fluke or the result of pathology. It was a natural outlier, a gift of genetics. Dr. Swerchek later said it was just a huge engine, clean as a whistle. The implications for Secretariat's racing career are profound. In horses, the heart is the engine that powers every stride. A larger heart pumps more blood with each beat, delivering oxygen to muscles more efficiently and clearing waste products faster. This means greater stamina, quicker recovery, and the ability to sustain high speeds over longer distances. Equine physiologists call this stroke volume, the amount of blood ejected with each contraction. Secretariat's stroke volume, though never measured directly in his lifetime, would have been off the charts. Some experts estimate it could have been as much as double that of an average racehorse. This biological advantage helps explain what the stopwatch alone cannot. Secretariat's ability to accelerate through the final quarters of the Kentucky Derby, to maintain a relentless drive in the Preakness Stakes, and to widen his lead in the Belmont Stakes was not just a matter of training or tactics. It was rooted in anatomy. His heart allowed him to do what other horses simply could not: recover from early exertion, find new reserves of speed, and keep pushing when his rivals faded. Durability is another piece of the puzzle. Secretariat raced 21 times in just 2 seasons, facing the best competition in the country under the harshest spotlight. While many modern champions are managed carefully, racing only a handful of times to protect their value, Secretariat's campaign was relentless. His massive heart may have been the key to that resilience, allowing him to bounce back from hard races with a level of recovery that set him apart from his peers. When racing historians and veterinarians look back at Secretariat's career, the autopsy finding is more than a curiosity. It is the biological foundation for his legend. The numbers in the record book are extraordinary, but the real secret may have always been within his chest, a heart built for the impossible. Join our newsletter down below for more fascinating stories and check out our other videos on the screen. Secretariat's legend is built not just on the brilliance of a single afternoon, but on the weight of an entire career. In 2 seasons, he raced 21 times, a volume that stands out in any era. He did not just flash greatness and vanish. He returned to the starting gate again and again, taking on the best of his generation under every imaginable condition. 16 wins, 3 seconds, a third. 5 Eclipse Awards, including back-to-back Horse of the Year titles. That kind of durability is rare, especially when paired with such explosive speed. The sport's most respected analysts have long tried to measure greatness. Andrew Beyer, whose speed figures became the gold standard for American racing, once calculated that Secretariat's Belmont performance would have earned a Beyer of 139, the highest ever assigned. For context, Flightline, the modern marvel who stunned the world in 2022, posted a peak Beyer of 126. That number puts Flightline in elite company, but his entire career spanned just 6 races. Secretariat, by contrast, shouldered a campaign more than 3 times as long, facing the grind of travel, changing surfaces, and the relentless expectations of a nation. Beyer himself has argued that while Flightline's peak was dazzling, Secretariat's combination of speed and stamina, delivered over so many starts, is what sets him apart. When the conversation turns to unbeaten records, Frankel's name always enters the debate. The British superstar retired with 14 wins and no defeats, never so much as headed at the finish, and posted some of the highest world ratings ever seen. Yet Frankel never tackled the mile-and-a-half dirt distance of the Belmont, nor did he face the American Triple Crown's unique gauntlet. 3 races in 5 weeks, each at a different track, each demanding a different kind of brilliance. Citation: the last Triple Crown winner before Secretariat, won 16 consecutive races in 1948, an achievement that still commands respect. But Citation never posted the kind of raw, clock-defying times that Secretariat did. The stopwatch draws a line between them. Durability matters. So does the ability to deliver under the brightest lights, again and again. Secretariat's records have survived generations of challengers, from Affirmed to American Faro to Justify. His 21 starts, each one a test of resilience, stand in sharp contrast to the modern trend of carefully managed, lightly raced champions. In every era, some horses burn hot and fast, others endure. Secretariat did both. To measure greatness, the sport needs more than a single number. It needs a body of work, a stack of evidence that withstands every new challenger. Secretariat's career, viewed through the lens of speed figures, win streaks, and sheer volume, remains the benchmark. No horse has matched his blend of speed, stamina, and durability. The records still stand. The legend only grows. 50 years later, Secretariat's time records remain untouched, outpacing every horse that has come since, even as training, nutrition, and breeding have advanced. His legacy is not just in numbers, it is in showing that biological limits can be shattered. As new generations chase the impossible, the question is not if another will match him, but whether greatness like this can ever be engineered. Join our newsletter down below for more fascinating stories and check out our other videos on the screen.